Okay, Ben here again, and I hope you can read the fonts here. They're a little bit small, but I thought we'd do something different today. As I was doing a search for the best Famicom Disk System games, as you do, and came across this Nintendo Life article from 1 year ago, celebrating the 35th anniversary of the Famicom Disk System, as well as the 35th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda. But feature 8 NES games that were better on the Famicom Disk System. If that's not clickbait, I don't know what is. But in this response video, we'll definitely discuss how at least one of those is absolutely wrong. But let's get to it. And as you can see, you've got The Legend of Zelda, Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, and Metroid there. And like I said, one of those three is wrong. So let's find out which one. And again, hopefully you can read this, because the screen on the camera is way too small for me to check quality as I'm recording. The Famicom Disk System, or the Family Computer Disk System to give its full title, released in Japan, and Japan only, on February 21st, 1986. This Famicom add-on came with a wave of new games on bespoke Nintendo-branded floppy disks, which had several advantages over cartridges at the time, plus one or two drawbacks. Load times from the disks were an issue, then as now, and you're far more likely to come across a non-functioning FDS disc these days than you are a Famicom cartridge. And you can see the cartridges there in that picture. Thankfully, I have not come across an FDS diskette that has not worked. But yeah, they didn't have the metal shield that you slid over for most of the 3.5-inch floppy disks for computers. And yeah, if you get it anywhere near a magnetic field, it's going to erase the data on the diskette, which you do not want. However, durability aside, the Famicom Disk System offered cheap memory for developers to use and expanded the functionality of the base console. An extra audio channel enabled games with a richer soundscape, and thanks to its innate ability to write data to disks, it was possible to save your game and return to it later, a feature that wouldn't become common on cartridges until later, thanks to the extra cost of battery-powered save memory, such as the Legend of Zelda gold cartridge, which you can see on the right. Password systems were often used as an inelegant compromise on carts. Inelegant. That is an opinion, but certainly the Metroid passwords were very long and convoluted and could be broken. The Famicom Disk System had exclusives, of course, games like Yume Kojo Doki Doki Panic, which would famously be adapted to become Super Mario Bros. 2 in the West, Otoki, and the mysterious Murasame Castle are particular highlights. Although the majority of its biggest games would be adapted to the cartridge format before long, because chips became cheaper, hence negating the entire reason for the disk system in the first place, aside from saving and more storage. But yeah, chips also became larger, so negating that. Although, in honor of its 35th anniversary, which it shares with a certain game at the bottom of this list, the aforementioned Legend of Zelda, we picked out 8 games, 7 including that game, which came to the NES in the West that we think were probably better on FDS. When it comes to NES games, there's a lot of nostalgia involved, and we love the Western versions of nearly all of the games below to death. Still, we think the Japanese gamers got the slightly better versions of these classics. Let us know your thoughts in the usual place. Well, this is not the comment section, but this is definitely a response video. Fair warning, there's lots of discussion about musical variations, extra wavetable synth channels, and save systems versus passwords to come, which we mentioned. Okay, first up, Castlevania Nes. Publisher Konami, developer Konami. Release date May 1st, 1987 in the US. December 19th, 1988 in the UKEU. So you're talking about Famicom Disk Systems, and you're not going to discuss the fact that it was released in September 1986 for the disk system? Okay. Anyway, moving on. And why are they using the Western box art only and not the Famicom Disk System box art alongside it for comparison? Okay. Better is a subjective term, of course. A disk-based system. Okay. As a disk-based system. Yes, with a K. The FDS release of Castlevania has load times not present in the cartridge version. However, on balance, we take the original Akumajo Dracula. The game also came out on Famicom cartridge in 1993 over the Western one, thanks to the convenience of saving your progress. Although, since speedrunners can beat the game in under 12 minutes, I mean, the save is a boon if you're recording videos, as I have done in the past, and an error occurred, causing you to restart. Okay, the ability to save comes with 3 save slots, each of which you assign a name when starting in a typical fashion. The name you use in the FDS is added to the credits at the end of the game, which is a neat touch. For example, and the hero Simon Belmondo AAA. It's not a game changer, but it's these little things which arguably make the FDS version the pick of the bunch. And I would agree with that. Again, it's quick and easy to get to the later stages. I almost said easy to beat, which is not true. But, yeah, overall, I do think it's better on the FDS. And the load times are not really an issue. Unlike some of the other games on this list. Next up, Metroid. Okay, publisher Nintendo, developer Nintendo R&D 1, which they got right. Release date 1st of August 1st, 1987 USA. And again, they do not have the Japanese box art or the Japanese release date, which was August of 1986. You'll find several games in this selection are included purely for the fact that the FDS version supported saves. Okay, if that's your main criteria, then there you go. Perhaps you couldn't wait to slip your password pack into the slot and input lengthy alphanumerics to pick up where you left off, but we always found it interminable. Metroid on Famicom Disk System might have lacked the ability to play as Samus Sans her armor if you could beat the game in under 3 hours, but will happily forego seeing the bounty hunter blasting space pirates in a pink leotard if it means not having to copy down multiple 24-digit passwords. Thank you for that, Micro Office Scan. Interestingly, the cutting room floor speculates that Nintendo may have intended to use battery backup to enable on-cart saves as opposed to the laborious password system used in the final release. As we'll hear more about below, the extra wavetable synth channel available on the FDS gave the disc version a richer palette to work with. The absence of the extra onboard sound chip meant audio that used it had to be reworked for the West. The comparison video below highlights how the atmospheric main theme benefited from the extra sound channel, and the appearance of Samus at 1 minute in switches from an organ-like hum to a juddering warble on the NES. However, the difference on other tracks is less pronounced. Brinstar, for example, Scrub to? Maybe skip to 114 and then to 2 minutes to hear the difference on that classic. And they've got a video for Metroid versus Metroid, NES versus FDS sound comparison. Okay, which we're not going to listen to. Also note how the title screen in the FDS version has a cool blue 3D logo, not a boring old flat one. Better indubitably. Okay, so thanks to the music video link, they actually included the box art differences. However, they also didn't show the yellow box re-release. But okay, that's nitpicking. As we saw there, Wrecking Crew NES. Nintendo R&D 1. US, October 18th, 1985. And then, wow, 2 years later in the UK and EU? No wonder other systems gained a foothold in Europe. Hardly a glittering jewel in the Nintendo firmament, Wrecking Crew began life on a standard Famicom cartridge in 1985 before making its way to the Disk System in 1989. Okay. Why dig this particular game out of the rubble? Well, spoilers. Sorry, can't be helped. For a Disk System encore, you ask? Well, the original game features a level editor which required the use of a Japan-only peripheral, the Famicom Data Recorder, if you wanted to save your creations to an old-school cassette tape. Also used to save custom Excitebike and Mach Rider tracks. The FDS version let you do this without the need for the tape deck peripheral and gave Wrecking Crew its very best chance to shine. Now that sounds very interesting, and I would be interested in checking that out. But okay, and again, as we can already see, Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link NES is next up. Publisher Nintendo, developer Nintendo EAD. Now, this I have a beef with because I think this game was developed by the same one as same developer as Legend of Zelda 1, which would be Nintendo R&D 4. Granted, Nintendo R&D 4 was later renamed to Nintendo EAD. However, that makes this article factually incorrect. Release date December 1st, 1988, USA, which was very hard to find at the time because of a lack of chips. And September 26th, 1988 in the UK. I am unsure as to the Famicom Disk System version. But there it says 1987, so there you go. Known as The Legend of Zelda 2 Link no Boken in Japan, the list of minor differences between Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link and the 1987 FDS original is a long one. We thoroughly recommend checking out the Cutting Room Floor's comprehensive roundup of regional differences. However, for us, the fact that the Famicom Disk System version had animated water on the overworld map is pretty significant. The top-down sections of the game, admittedly zoomed out compared to the view from the original Zelda, always struck us as lifeless and rudimentary. The movement of water, while hardly a revolution, helps add a little life to the otherwise static scenery, and it's amazing the impact that one effect has. Then there are musical differences. Here's a comparison of the title screens. Make your own judgments. And they have a link comparing music. So, basically, they come down to two things. Music and water. Water. Really? Animation of water really makes or breaks your enjoyment of the game? Are they not aware of the fact that in the Japanese version, if you die, it resets all of your levels to the lowest level you had attained? So, let's say for some reason I had attack on 5, life on 3 and magic on 2 because I really wanted to beef attack over the other 2 stats. If I died, that would all of them would reset to 2, losing all that progress. Is that really a trade-off you're willing to make? Plus, you have more enhanced colors for the... they're not temples, are they? Dungeons? Palaces, thank you. Palaces. So you got more colors, you got more fleshed out bosses. So water and music, you're going to take all of those trade-offs. Yeah. Anyway. And we'll scroll down and you can see, what did they say? Link no Boken, Famicom Han, Nihon Han, Kaigai Han, Opening Gamen, something Mita. So they're comparing the Famicom and NES versions. Okay. Okay, moving on. Kid Icarus, NES. Nintendo R&D 1. July 1st, 1987. February 15th, 1987. 1986 for the Famicom Disk System. And again, no box art. Currently. Yeah, the password system was convoluted. So, as we've already established, save slots rule, password systems rule, and Kid Icarus was another FDS game which had save scrapped for the NES conversion, just like Metroid, which makes sense as they were the sister games. The Disk System version, entitled Hikari Shinwa Palutena no Kagami, also remembers your top 5 best scores. Oh, there's a plus. Hip Tanaka's brilliant soundtrack also gets the now customary downgrade alterations in the West, but other territories also lost out on microphone functionality built into the Famicom second controller. You will see that again, if you don't already know. Originally, you could use this microphone while pressing the A button to haggle with shopkeepers, presumably shouting their ludicrous prices down to something reasonable. Of course, there was no voice recognition software, voice recognition going on here. The mic simply detected loud noises and other audio input and registered it accordingly. Interesting. We'll look at another Famicom Disk System title which famously used the microphone later. It might not be a huge addition, but it's a fun addition to an intriguing, if flawed, entry in Nintendo's 8-bit catalog. Flawed. The microphone, not the game itself. Okay, Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, Konami, December 1st, 1988, USA, April 27th, 1990. Wow, in the UK. And I'm not sure about Japan. While its reputation for inscrutability and willful confusion is well deserved, we've got a soft spot for Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest. Perhaps it's the killer soundtrack, that is true, or the fearlessness of the developers in trying new things, also true. But despite its deceptive villagers who provide obtuse and often downright misleading information because of a bad translation, and its near total lack of hand-holding, which results in an utterly impenetrable experience unless you use a guide, not true. It's got so much of the series spirit, we can't help but admire it. The Famicom Disk System features saves as opposed to a functional, if inelegant, password system. Yes, it was better than nothing, but entering passwords ain't our idea of fun. Perhaps the most notable difference is the reworked soundtrack of the Western release. Reworked music would be an element of Castlevania 3, 2, due to the NES not supporting the external VRC6 chip used in the Akumajo Densetsu Famicom cart, which added 3 additional sound channels to play with in the sequel and is totally awesome. We are so familiar with the Western version that it's tough to judge if the Famicom Disk System version is better, but check out the comparison of Bloody Tears below to hear the added richness of the original soundtrack. For example, the original intro is clearly emulating the ringing of bells, which the NES version doesn't convey at all. They're both rollicking good soundtracks, but the original FDS soundtrack boasts more variety, subtlety, and texture. And this is where I take issue with this being better on the Famicom Disk System, because even Konami doesn't think so. They released the NES version on the Anniversary Collection. Okay, the load times are atrocious. I attempted it during one of the 31 days, and I stepped out to gain some experience. There was a massive load time to get into the forest. And yes, Bloody Tears was awesome, as it always is. And then I stepped back into town, and there was another massive loading sequence. And then I turned the game off, because while I don't complain nearly as much as the people who say, oh my god, the PS5 is so much faster because of solid state. The PS4 load times are nothing. PS3 load times are pretty much nothing, unless they're poorly programmed, and then 1 or 2 games are really long. Even the PS1 load times are not as bad as Simon's Quest here. So, completely disagree with this. And then we got a link checking the audio. Now, yeah, you're much better off, unless Nintendo copyright struck everything and took them down, you're much better off listening to the soundtrack for this than playing the FDS version. Okay, and how many do... Oh, versus Excitebike. So there's at least 2 left to discuss. Publisher, Nintendo. Developer, Nintendo. Okay. August 31st, 2015 in the US. Okay, and hey, look. Famicom box art. Famicom Disk System box art. Look at that. This is technically a different, enhanced FDS exclusive sequel to the original Excitebike with added 2-player functionality and extra courses. But we'll bend the rules with this one just to talk about versus Excitebike for a bit. The fact that you could actually use the level editor and save your creations in the FDS version makes it the obvious choice if you're enjoying an 8-bit Excitebike on original hardware. As we mentioned earlier, the original Famicom Excitebike used the Famicom data recorder to save tracks in Japan. Interesting. I might have to look into picking one of those up. That functionality was retained in the NES version with the expectation that a similar peripheral may be released at a later date, although one never materialized. Aha! Subsequent Virtual Console re-releases enabled options to save tracks, of course. 3D Classics Excitebike, for instance. And this Versus update features totally different music to the original too. Interesting. Still, if you're not attached to the original audio, the FDS version offers the full Excitebike in Monty. Okay. Yeah, I can go along with this one. Being able to save tracks, boom. Again, another one I am very keen to pick up now after reading this article. And finally, don't get copyright struck. Okay, publisher Nintendo, developer Nintendo R&D 4. Thank you very much. Release date February 21st, 1986. August 22nd, 1987 in the US, November 15th, 1987 in the UK and EU. Note that those 2 release dates are very close, so unlike some of the previous games we discussed. The game, which shares its birthday with the original host system, the original Famicom Disk System version of Zelda no Densetsu, the Hyrule Fantasy, as The Legend of Zelda is known at home, might feature some questionable English and lack some of the subtle refinements that would manifest over the years in multiple re-releases. Not necessary. But it's arguably still the best way to experience the game as it was designed to be played. And I would agree with that. Although you can't go wrong with the NES version either, so there you go. Thankfully, Nintendo did splash out for battery-powered save functionality for the NES cart in the West, banishing passwords to the darkness where they belong. However, the soundtrack and audio effects are noticeably richer in the original, which makes a huge difference when you're on an epic quest that is all about atmosphere and adventure. See below for a handy comparison, courtesy of Legends of Localization's Clyde Manlin. Now, Legends of Localization has a great website that makes all these comparisons, so you don't need to watch that video if you would prefer to read. But anyway, the Famicom's microphone embedded in Player 2's controller was also famously used to defeat the appropriately named Pole's Voice, a sound-sensitive rat mole creature that roamed the dungeons. Okay, so a sound-sensitive rat mole creature that roams the dungeons and could be destroyed most efficiently by shouting into the mic, or sound-sensitive rat mole creatures that roam the dungeons. It wasn't until Phantom Hourglass that Zelda fans in the West were able to give these enemies a sound thrashing with an aural blast into their DS microphones. And it's pretty neat, but you know, it's once you do it once or twice, it's not really necessary to continue using it. But yeah, you know, it's better to have it than to not have it. And we've got Legend of Zelda audio differences and comparison, Famicom Disk System versus NES, Legends of Localization, Book 1, The Legend of Zelda audio differences. Now, I think the video and translation differences are much more interesting, but okay, big thanks to the cutting room floor, which provided invaluable when researching the differences between the versions of the games above. If you're interested in seeing some of these Famicom Disk Systems games in action, we recommend checking out Jeremy Parrish's 30th anniversary look at the system. Have you played the FDS versions of any of the games above? Let us know below, and I think I've gone over all of that. So, they are 6 for 8. Zelda better or the same versus Excitebike. Being able to say it makes sense. Castlevania 2, absolutely not. Kid Icarus, being able to save, probably. Adventure of Link, questionable. I would definitely go with the NES. Wrecking Crew, I mean, saving beats that. Metroid, again, I'm not sure about the load time. Can you believe I have not played this on FDS? But, I mean, saving, again, it's very short, so it's not that big of a deal. Same with Castlevania. But yeah, I'll give them a 6 out of 8, which is a 75% for being correct. So, that was 8 NES games that were better on the Famicom Disk System. An article by Nintendo Life, celebrating the now 36th anniversary of Zelda here on the channel in the middle of Final Fantasy February. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, let me know if you think there are other games that are better on the FDS. One that was worse, in particular, being Jackal by Konami, which is very sad because I'd like to pick that up otherwise. But definitely go with the NES version if you're getting Jackal. But yeah, again, Nintendo Life, 8 NES games that were better on the Famicom Disk System. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Have a good one.